The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, good afternoon or good morning, depending on, of course, when you're watching this. My name is David Gross with Conde Systems, and it's my distinct honor to have Jimmy Lamb with Sawgrass with us today. Jimmy, how are you?
I'm doing great, David. Glad to be here as always. And you know, this has been one of our most popular webinar topics that you and I have done together. So looking forward to presenting it again.
It is, and I can't tell you how many compliments and calls and emails I get, Jimmy, from people that just have a thirst for more. They've thoroughly enjoyed the first webinar we did, which we, of course, posted on Conde TV. And the good news is I think there's going to be some resources that we'll talk about at the in the webinar that will help people with this. What Jimmy would say at this point in time is everybody is in listen only mode, and we are accepting questions, and I think Jimmy will be the seer of the questions, and if there's a question that's appropriate to answer at the time that it appears, so be it. Otherwise, we will do the best to answer the questions at the end.
That's it, David. You got my lines right here for me. So,
well, Jimmy, go ahead and let's start.
All right, so let's go. Time is money, and that's the way that I've always looked at everything when I do pricing. Because before I can do pricing, I got to know what it costs to produce. And way back when I started my first product decoration business, which was actually embroidery, I learned a whole lot about this whole concept of time is money. We've all heard about it, but you'll find that if you use that as a basis, you put yourself in a pretty good position to really cost out what it costs to do something. So where I like to start is just sort of a general simple look at what it costs to produce something with sublimation, because once we fully understand that, then we're in a better position to say, well, what do we sell it for? Okay, so in my example, I'm going to apply this image that you see here, the Surf's Up logo, using an SG800 printer from Condé with Sublimation HD ink. We're going to put it on a poly performance tee in the size of an 8" by 10". Okay, now what does that cost? Well, let's say that my operation, I've done the work, and I'm going to show you how to do the work. David and I are together are going to go through a spreadsheet in a little while, which you'll be able to download from Condé, that will help you generate some of this kind of information for you. So let's say your cost of operation was $30 an hour. Now, I did some calculations to come up with that, but I'll tell you, when you're in a webinar, it's best that you use easy math. So $30 an hour works out to 50 cents a minute. You see where I'm going here? Okay, so let's say that it took a minute to print that image, 8 by 10. You should be able to do that in a minute, okay? And let's say it took a minute on the heat press on the shirt. And typically when I do apparel, I'm doing it about 35 to 40 seconds. So 1 minute's fine, okay? So it took me in printing and pressing, it took me 2 minutes. If it took me 2 minutes at 50 cents a minute, then it cost me $1. Okay, you see where I'm assigning time and monetary values together. Now that's an important thing to understand, because in theory now I just spent $1, not including my art setup. If I had to do a long art setup, that's a little different. Okay, I just spent $1 to actually produce the shirt. Now a lot of times people are saying, well, how much ink did you use? Okay, well, that's not really important, as you're going to see here, because of how our ink costs really are used. I mean, because when you think about ink, you're creating samples, you're doing test runs, you're doing head cleaning. So the reality is ink is something that you use all the time. You know, it's a consumable. All right, and that is part of your overhead, that cost of operation. We'll drill down into that in just a minute. So for this particular example, it's $1 to produce it. But here's the thing that I want everyone to be so aware of, okay? Because if you start thinking it cost me $1 to make the shirt, and you add up the cost of the shirt, let's say the shirt was $5 blank, and $1, you'd say it costs $6 to make the shirt. And that's actually wrong, okay? Because you have to account for your downtime as well, because that's part of the process time. So let's say it takes 5 minutes to actually set up the job, to get everything in place, ready to go. 5 minutes at 50 cents a minute, that's $2.50. That's true cost. Okay, it's costing you to do that. At the very end, you have to take the shirt, pull off the transfer. You're going to have to fold the shirt up. Maybe you got a little bit of quick paperwork. Clock's still ticking at 50 cents a minute. So that was $2.50. So my total production costs with my downtime factored in and my print press time came out to $6. Okay. What happened to that $1? It was $6. Now, I don't want you to be overwhelmed with that and start thinking, wow, I mean, that's really expensive. What I'm trying to do is just illustrate points to you about how efficiency plays into what you do, okay? Because it's very possible you can reduce those numbers significantly if you understand that you have to deal with it. Now, how did this cost ink-wise? On this particular job, it was 42 cents worth of ink, and the paper was about 20 cents. So it was about 62 cents is what it came out to in our media cost. But that's really and truly should be covered out of your operational overhead. That's not like I got to add it in. But my point becomes you're spending the majority of your cost in the production, not in the actual materials, okay? And that's a very important thing to understand about anything we do with sublimation or any kind of printing for that matter. So the ink cost for the shirt was approximately 42 cents, which was 7% of the production cost, not including the blank shirt. So if you're producing products, you got to make sure you're covering everything. And really, I mean, the simplest way I put it is if your overheads are $30 per hour, and you produce one item in 1 hour, that thing costs you $30 to make. I mean, I don't care what it was. If it took an hour to make a coaster, that coaster costs you $30, okay? So because you had to account for the entire hour, okay? So I'm hoping that makes sense to you, and we'll follow along as we go, okay? So if we need a printing
Yeah,
cost,
let me just
yeah, go ahead, David.
say this. So ultimately, we can give you some great rules of thumb regarding keeping up with your material costs, shirt, paper, ink, those kinds of things. But understand, of course, that there's a little bit more to your long term, which is what Jimmy's trying to convince you, that if you're aware of your cost of running your business, then you got a whole lot better chance of staying in business. Isn't that right, Jimmy?
That is very much true. All right, so developing a printing cost strategy. Pricing begins with understanding of your cost. So we're going to look a little deeper here. We're going to figure out our cost of operation. As David said, if you don't know the cost to operate your business, you're already in trouble. And that's something we all kind of learn a lot of times the hard way in the beginning. We got to look beyond the most visible costs and sometimes look deeper to find out what all our costs are. And somewhere along the way, you need to factor in a paycheck. Now, I'll be the first to tell you, just because you factor it in doesn't mean you get paid, but it means you have a better chance of getting paid. Okay, so part of your overhead should be paying yourself. A lot of people, they figure out their overhead without paying themselves, and then they're just going to take the money out of the profit. Well, that's truly what's going to happen. You're going to have profit to actually get paid. But I look at my bottom line, break-even point means I got paid. Okay, anything I made beyond that is more money. Okay, something to that effect. So here's our basic steps for building a price sheet. We're going to determine operational cost. We're going to break those costs into usable increments, compare production against those operational costs, calculate margins based on market influences. And that one can be tricky. There is no master markup. Okay, people are always saying, hey, well, what do I mark this up? Well, there's a lot of variables into our marking up. And I like to say that marketing equals margin, because if you market your products the right way, you'll get better margins, because what you can sell it for really comes down to the perception of value on the part of the customer. So you got to work hard on that.
And we're gonna talk more about that, I'm sure.
Yes. And then finally, there may be job specific and miscellaneous costs that come into it as well. All right, let's look real quickly at what operational costs truly could be. If you talk to a digital decorator, sublimator, anybody who uses ink, and you ask them, what's the most expensive part of your business, they typically say the ink. I was an embroiderer, and I would say equipment payments, because my equipment was quite a bit more expensive than sublimation equipment. So it all depends on kind of what people do when you ask them, what is your main business cost? And a lot of that has to do with just visibility. Okay, that's what it comes down to. If you're buying ink frequently, which hopefully that means you're producing a lot, you're well aware of what that cost is every time you get a new set of ink. So it becomes visible to you. Okay. What you sometimes forget is how many products you actually got out of that ink, but you're aware of that cost. As good business owners should always be aware of the cost. So you start to focus on some of the big ones, forgetting that a lot of the small ones add up to be quite large, but because they're small individual costs, they don't really jump out at you. Okay. Some of the things you need to think about with sublimation is your media, basically your paper, maybe some films, depending on the stuff you're doing, all kinds of different supplies, administrative costs. I mean, there's lots and lots of stuff in our admin, blanks, labor, we can go down a pretty long list, okay? Something that looks probably more like this, okay? Lots and lots of costs there. And unfortunately, sometimes we don't think about it till tax time. We really need to think about those costs when? Always, okay? Because a lot of this is adding up to your overhead, which is then in turn affecting whether you actually make money or not because of what it costs to produce something. Now, how do we break those down? We can add them up, but how do we break it down? For example, how does an annual cost of $60,000 per year break down? Well, if you took the $60,000 per year, assuming it was fixed, and costs are variable too, that's not really fixed, but let's say it was $60,000 a year. If you work 48 production weeks out of the year, that's $1,250 per week that you need to earn in net revenue, not gross, net revenue. Okay. And a 5-day work week. Yeah, you saw that. A 5-day work week, 250 per day, 8-hour work day, it's $31.25 per hour. That's how it breaks down. Okay. But you see now you took a big number like that you couldn't do much with, and you put it into a number that's very workable when you start looking at how many pieces per hour can you generate. Some of the key points, hourly overhead is pretty much constant regardless of sales and production. I mean, your overhead can drop some if you're not producing because you're not using as many supplies and consumables, but for the most part, it doesn't drop much. So the hourly overhead is always there. That's what I'm trying to say. As the business grows, the costs will too. And that's natural. If you're producing more, your costs are going to go up. The idea is that, hey, we're making more revenue, so we can cover all that. And you can always track your production output to determine your financial status. And that part I really like. I like to know at the end of the day, how much do we produce today? And be able to, look back on what my cost of operation that day was. Am I on track? Am I behind? Am I ahead? So, those are things that are very useful to me. Even if you're a single person operation, it's still useful to know.
And by the way, there's always some great advantages to operating your own business from a tax point of view.
Oh, yes.
You just have to, focus on making some profit in your business, or ultimately the IRS will consider it sort of a hobby.
True. So what does it really cost to produce something? I showed you sort of rough. I'm going to show you just a little more detailed real quick. Okay. So let's say we're going to stick with $30 per hour, and let's say we want to do 12 plaques. All right. Let's say that our print and press cost was 2 minutes basically per plaque times 12 times 50 cents per minute. So our production, our true production is $12. Let's say we're going to set it up, we got to sit down with Creative Studio or Photoshop or something and put it together. So let's say we can do that in 15 minutes at 50 cents per minute because your time's not free. At $7.50 to set it up. At the very end, I use 15 minutes. It might be excessive, but I do need to examine each plaque to make sure it was done right. I need to wrap them up so that they're not banging against each other in the box. Put them in the box, seal the box, do the paperwork. So it might be 15 minutes. So that's $7.50 on the backside. And also we got to think about when we're producing, because we got to account for all our time. That's what I'm trying to do is account for all of the time. We have to take one item off the heat press, put another one on, and maybe even tape the paper to it. So that's easily 1 minute per substrate. And if we got 12 substrates, because we have 12 plaques, that's 12 more minutes of production time in addition to true printing and pressing. At 50 cents a minute, that's another $6. So my total cost of downtime was 21. All these stuff right here. My total cost of production was 12. So my total cost of production beginning to end was $33. So my production cost per unit was $2.75. So basically $2.75 is what it cost me for each plaque times 12 plaques. And then we would work our markup in from there. So that's an important aspect because it was more than just the ink and the paper. Okay. And that's what I wanted you to see there. Someone's asking what's the difference between net sales and gross sales. Look at it this way. If you sold something for $12 and it total cost to produce it was $6, your gross sale was $12, but your net sale was what you kept after the cost of the product was subtracted out. So if the product cost you $6 to make, your net sale was $6. That's what you kept of the sale.
Well, yeah, we would hopefully normally call that net profit.
Yeah.
You know, there are different ways to describe it. You can keep up, obviously, with what your gross profit before expenses are. So you have fixed and variable expenses.
Yep. But essentially, is just think of the net profits, what I put in my pocket. Your gross sale is what the selling price was, but that's not all profit unless you get really good at this somehow. And I don't think you're ever going to do quite that. Just as a quick tip here, and I like to throw in a little tip. And when you talk about production costs, you're trying to make it where you produce more pieces per hour is really what it comes down to. More pieces against the same overhead. So the cost per piece drops. Staging your work is one of the things that when people first get into this, they have a habit of not staging their work and they may waste a lot of time. Okay. So I'm going to show you an example of what I mean. But I take every job and I look at the job as actually being potentially multiple jobs. Okay, you got one job from a customer, but it's got multiple products, and each product is like its own sub job. Okay, and that's important to understand because we may have to change the pressure on our heat press. Occasionally, we may have to change the temperature, and these are all things that take time. If you're waiting for the temperature to go up or go down, you're sitting there waiting. Okay, so these are things to think about. So I look at sort of breaking it down, the different products on a given job by thickness, by material, and by size. That's my breakdowns. But let me show you a little better image of my thought process. Let's say that 3 clients come in, client A, B, and C. And you can see what client A ordered, what B ordered, and what C ordered. Okay? And you'll notice that there's different substrates for each client. So you could do this job as do all of client A's work first, then do all of B's work, and then do all of C's work. But a better way to do this is say, listen, t-shirts are a little different than everything else because we're probably going to be using the foam, different temperature settings, and everything else. Let's just go ahead and run all our t-shirts at one time. Get the production run set up for t-shirts and just do it, okay? And so now if you look at it, if I start scheduling it by substrate instead of by client, you can see that I'm going to do all my iPhone covers at the same time. I'm going to do all my metal license plates at the same time. I'm going to do all my wood plaques at the same time, all my mouse pads at the same time, all my t-shirts across multiple orders. So a lot of times staging your work like this just means you get more efficiency of time, okay? And it actually keeps your overhead down a little bit. Now I'm going to show you the old-fashioned
Let me
Jimmy way.
interject
Yes.
here real quick. So also one of the things to factor into this is, of course, your waste.
Yep.
And you may be getting to it because ultimately you will waste materials. I talked to a client today and they printed all their transfers before they even measured to see if it was the correct size. And so being aware of your waste, and one of my tips is to create your wall of shame so that it's in your face,
Yes.
so that you can keep from making that mistake again, whether it's to forgetting to mirror image, or, in case of glass or acrylic, you don't mirror image. But ultimately, that's where Jimmy's tips about improving your skills so that you do have lower variable cost.
Yes. Um, Definitely. I was teaching a workshop recently on a lot of different types of transfers, but in the sublimation section, for whatever reason, I kept putting the darn transfer on upside down on a t-shirt, and it just had to do with the layout of the graphic. It looked like that was right side up when it was upside down. So nothing like being in front of a group of people eager to learn and show them how to do it wrong. But you can learn a lot from watching somebody do it wrong too. So, um, yeah, I know
Done
how that
that, been
goes.
there. So
Yep.
yes.
Okay, so I do tell people, listen, you don't have to go out and buy a sophisticated production management program. There's easy ways to track stuff. I'm going to show you just how simple a system that we typically have used, believe it or not, for tracking production, so that anybody can use. So remember, I showed you how the job was, any given client had multiple pieces. So let's say this is the original invoice right here, and we're listing each item here, which to me is a sub job. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 items. So I made 5 copies of that sheet and then highlighted what was to be done on each sheet. So essentially what I did was master invoice broken down into 5 subjobs, okay, which are each one's a different substrate. And a lot of people in their shops, they have shelves and they have boxes. I don't like boxes. You can't see inside them. We actually invest in laundry baskets, which are cheap, but because you can see inside them, okay? You can put them on shelves. You can look inside, see what's right there. You take that individual job sheet and tape it on each one as you're splitting up the substrates. And so now you took client A's job and you broke it into 5 baskets, iPhones in one, T-shirts in the other, license plates, whatever in there, and you put them on the shelf. But because you can clearly see them, you can take all the license plate ones and now rearrange them so they're together, and all the T-shirts are together. But that piece of paper that's taped on every one tells you the original order. So when you're all done, all the pieces go back, to the original order. Very simple. I mean, people can make this very sophisticated, much more, than what I've done here. But I tell people a lot of times, especially small operations, sometimes the simplest method is the best. It doesn't have to be real fancy, It just needs to work for you. But anyway, keep that efficiency going, okay? Now, volume discounts. It's very interesting that, have you ever noticed that if a customer buys more, they expect a lower price? And have you also noticed that most people offer a lower rate for a larger volume of goods? So my question is, could you actually do it, or did you do it because the customer wanted it? The reality is, if you figure it out, you can do multiple pieces. You can get more efficient with your time, so the cost per piece does drop, so that you can do volume runs at a lower price. But you also need to understand why that is and kind of how to calculate that out, so you're not just throwing out a discount for larger volume that is, because if you're just throwing it out, it may not be profitable, okay? So let me give you a really simple, easy comparison so you can see what I'm talking about. Let's say that we had that every job, okay, let's just say every job that we did over the course of, say, a day or something was one piece, okay? So we're doing all these one-piece jobs. And so let's say that with a one-piece job, it took 15 minutes to set up, and you probably can do it in less than that. These are just the numbers I'm using. 2 minutes of printing and pressing, 15 minutes on the backside. That was 32 minutes. If it was a $30 hourly overhead, that thing cost you $16 to make, all right? So, and then you started the next job. So you're like starting all over again because it was completely different. What if every job had 6 pieces of the same thing, okay? And really, truly, setup time shouldn't change by quantity or quality. I mean, setup time, we're talking about we're getting the heat press set right, we're getting materials out, we may be doing some basic artwork, whatever, okay? Should be the same for 6 pieces as one. Now, let's say that the printing and pressing was a total of 12 minutes now, 2 minutes apiece for 6 pieces, 15 minutes on the backside. The total runtime was 42 minutes. The overhead at $30 per hour, it came out to $3.50 each. And that's because we got so much more efficient in our time. Now, These are just simple numbers on the paper. But my whole point, and one of the things that you start to learn, you'll see I list pre-actual post. What you want to do is have this actual time as high as you can and these pre and post as low as you can. And that's what's going to translate into bringing that cost down, okay? Because you're really getting more pieces, in a lower piece of time. Now, one other thing, I just made this like we were printing and pressing one piece at a time. If you're doing phone covers, you're doing name badges, you can print and press big groups of them at the same time, and you get even more effective. But this is just to kind of illustrate to you that within reason, because there's a point of diminishing returns where this doesn't work anymore, but within reason, if we're doing more of the same thing at the same time, it is going to get cheaper per piece to do it, and you can pass that on as a discount if you choose to do so. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely true, to everything from ganging jobs together to even, for instance, saving paper by using a smaller paper for just one cover.
Absolutely.
There's certainly all sorts of things you can do to reduce your cost, but yet make it quite effective to do that one mug.
Yeah.
If that's what's required.
And that's a great point, David, because you look at, let's say, a sheet of 8.5 by 11 paper. I think it averages around 20 cents or so. And it's easy to say, well, that's 20 cents. That's not a lot of money. Okay, but if we were printing one, phone cover or something per sheet, and you went out and printed, 10 phone covers, that's $2 worth of paper. And you're wasting a lot of paper, because you could have put multiple phone covers. So as David was saying about ganging things together and maximizing the use of that paper, that stuff adds up over time. So you definitely want to be efficient as you can. And
yeah, again, there's just all sorts of ways that you can improve as you said, your time involved with the product, figuring out how best to do that. So all sorts of little tweaks that you can make that over time, of course, add up to a lot of money.
Oh, yeah. Now, the final piece I want to talk about, and then we're going to play with the spreadsheet, okay, which will be downloadable that you can, have for your own, is the market influence, okay, because that's when we start talking about our markups. And really and truly, your markups have to come from the perception of value, because it's only worth what someone will pay for it. And there are things in sublimation that I've seen where you can probably get 600% markup without a whole lot of effort, and there's other things that you might be struggling to get a 50% markup. So a whole lot of it has to do, how do we present it to the customer? There's no like master formula, and different people have different viewpoints. So again, it comes down to, how do you raise the perceived value? Well, I can tell you with sublimation, a lot of times it's not as much what it is as what you put on it. So that visual aspect can really drive the perceived value higher so that you can get a better margin. So let me show you an example. Here we have, a basic, photo panel. It could be a wood plaque, it could be a metal photo panel, whatever. And that's worth a certain amount of money to the family of this young football player. Okay. So they're willing to pay a price to buy that, so that, they have great memory that they've captured, right? But what if we made a little change? And here, oh, that slid off the screen. But okay, whatever here, look, I took a different substrate. I took the exact same image, and now we start putting text and some interesting graphics on here. Now, our print and press time is the same, okay? Exactly the same. I will say the substrate on the right could cost more than that, depending on whatever the choice was for the one on the left. But let's say we paid a little bit more for the substrate here on the right. We took some time to put some things in. Ideally, this would have his name instead of just, regional champs. I guarantee you can sell the one on the right for more than you went on the left, okay? Because of perception of value. The one on the right is just more interesting, So can you do that? Can you sit down and take things that people want to do and just add some additional graphics in there and make them a little more exciting and a little bit more valuable? That's a big part of getting better margins. is doing that.
Yeah, and Jimmy, when I teach my classes, I try to teach the concept of lanyap, and lanyap is usually I give a prize if somebody knows what that word means. Do you know
Good,
what
'cause
that
I
word
don't know what it
means?
means, so I'm not going to get the prize.
So lanyap means something extra, and your job as the digital decorator is to deliver more value than the client is expecting, and that's how you get referral sales. That's how you get
Right.
repeat sales, but that's how you're able to charge what I call a value premium. And Jimmy, you've got a perfect example there. Something that, for instance, is dated. Okay, so
Yep.
maybe they get the next one, they get the next year's one. And so by dating it, by personalizing, and Jimmy, last time I looked, it cost the same really in paper and ink, so to speak, to do what I will call a Walmart job, which slap a photograph versus come up with something that really has a personal impact.
True. And all day long, that personal impact is going to bring you more money. Another example though, that was like image wise, but really even on products. I mean, one of the things I've found, I've been doing apparel products forever. And it's funny because we put the same amount of labor and the same amount of cost into doing a t-shirt versus a sweatshirt, but sweatshirts across the board with the consumer have a much higher level of perceived value than t-shirts do. And yeah, the product value is a little higher, but not necessarily a lot higher. But you take the same thing on a sweatshirt, you can sell it for a lot more than if it's on a t-shirt, and that's because of the perception of value of the actual product. And let me show you what I'm talking about. Putting together some numbers here real quick. A t-shirt blanket 15, sweatshirt t-shirt was 5, the sweatshirt was 15. There's a lot of difference in the product price there, because we're talking about products that can be sublimated. If you're actually screen printing and you're using 100% cotton, these can be lower. But here's the point I want to get at is the print cost is the same, the overhead is the same, but in the retail world, you can easily get $35 for the sweatshirt. The t-shirt you may only be getting say 15 to 18. Okay. And look at the difference in your margins there. And here we got a higher margin because of perceived value of the sweat versus the tee. Okay, not even the image. Throw a really good image on there, it might get even better. But that's just one of the other things we have to contend with when we're out there working on our pricing. Okay, all day long, what's it worth to the customer? Okay, and you got to work hard on that. You work hard on that, you'll be successful. Okay, so what I want to do here is I'm going to switch real quick to my spreadsheet. So give me just a moment here while I change
I'll
screens.
throw in a couple of things while you're doing
Okay.
that. So when I teach, often like Jimmy, talk about the concept of value, and I try to break it down to three things. Number one is the base substrate has some value, a mug versus a mouse pad. And then number two, of course, is the artwork. And number three is how you sell and market the product. Examples in that are you presenting the product as if it's at a flea market or an upscale boutique? And then overarching is this product being sold into a retail environment, or is it going to be sold for wholesale? So for instance, you could partner with the local pet groomer to produce photos of pets on products for people, which is of course one of my favorite favorite items. Conde has recently started trying to throw a new dimension to all this, really in the value equation, and that is to begin to introduce retail point of purchase packaging. So for instance, I don't know if you saw, did you see our mug box, Jimmy, that we've rolled out?
Yes.
And so you sublimate to the box. It's inexpensive. You fold it, you deliver it to maybe the client you're doing wholesale fulfillment for or retail, and suddenly the product is worth more. how much more does it have to be worth, Jimmy, to do it? Well, sort of simple. It has to be worth more than you paid for the box. So if you're able, if the box, for just discussion, is $1, and you're able to get a $5 premium for the product in the great box, then that works out, doesn't it?
Yep. Yes, it does. Okay, everyone should be able to see the spreadsheet now that's on the screen. This is in Microsoft Excel, and this is something that Conde will make available to anyone that wants to download. There's no charge for this. This is provided to you as a tool. And as I would tell everyone that uses this tool, please update it with your own numbers. When I put numbers in here for webinars and seminars, a lot of times I'm using round numbers. I'm trying to keep the categories simple. So look at your whole business and say, what makes sense for me? Do I need to add in additional, cost, areas, etc. You may even need a stopwatch here and there, so you update it to reflect your business. But I don't lock any of the cells, which means you can change any of the formulas. You can also delete any of the formulas, and then you just download it again. There is no warranty, and you don't get your money back because you didn't pay for it to begin with. But anyway, a lot of people have used this and modified it and felt very comfortable with it. So please keep that in mind. So following along with what we said in the PowerPoint, okay, the very first thing I want to do is, what does it cost to run my business? And here I try to figure out an estimate of the annual operational cost for a fictitious business. I'll put it to you that way. And a lot of bills we think about monthly, but some of our bills are actually quarterly, twice a year, annually. So you can put in more columns if it makes you feel better, however you want to do it. But the idea is, let's get all our numbers into a yearly format, a yearly total, all right? Here I've put in F for like a fixed value. So for example, let's say that you've gone out and you bought a VJ628 and you leased it or financed it and you're making monthly payments. Okay, that's something you're going to be a fixed value. So the F's are fixed and the V are variable. It's important to realize that some of your bills, they fluctuate. And that's just life. Okay, that's how it works. So the idea is to get all this into a yearly format because I want to know what it costs to run, in theory, this business over the course of 1 year. Now you'll see my bottom line says owner's draw or paycheck, and I always put that in, and there's a little note. If you really haven't used spreadsheets, there's a little red triangle as a note. And the note says that just because you account for this doesn't mean you'll actually earn it, as everything is dependent on your sales volume. But my point is, if you factor in a base level paycheck for yourself, it's spread out against all of your overhead, into your overhead, and against all your different products, and there's a better chance you'll actually get paid sooner if you actually put it in there. Okay, the reality is you're the first person that doesn't get paid when you don't have enough sales. All right, so like I said, just because you put it in there doesn't mean that immediately every month you're going to get a paycheck for that. Just keep that in mind. Yep. If you're brand new looking at this, it might even scare you. My overhead is $57,000. Well, look at what the highest part of the overhead was. You, okay? So the reality here is, if you weren't getting paid, let's put it as 0 for just a minute, okay? Your overhead is $15,600. So now you breathe a sigh of relief, except you're not getting paid. And that's why I say it's important to really be thinking about paying ourselves, so that we're setting up a legitimate baseline pricing, okay, that makes sure you get paid, all right, eventually. We have enough sales. Everything you see in blue are numbers you need to put in yourself. Everything you see in green are calculated for you. Next question is, how many weeks you're going to work out of the year? Please don't say 52, okay? I work 56, but, that's not true either. So I put in 48 weeks. So the spreadsheet does the math. It took 57,600 divided by 48, came out to 1,200. So your weekly cost of operations is $1,200 per week over 48 weeks. If you were working 5 days per week, it's $240 per day. If you happen to be working 8 hours per day, it's $30 per hour. Now I know when you're starting out, if you've really thrown yourself into it, you may find yourself working 16 hours a day, Please don't put that down here. Put what you want to work, not what you are working. Because if you put in, I'm working 16-hour days, you have an artificial cost of operations at now $15 per hour. But you always have to work 16 hours a day if your pricing becomes based on $15 an hour. So the point is, put what you want to work, not necessarily what you are working. And hey, if you only want to work, 10 weeks out of the year, just put it up there, and you'll factor it out for you. So try to be legitimate here of where you want to be, not necessarily where you are, if that makes sense. Now, this is at what we call that 10,000 foot level, and that means looking at it without all the details. I'm going to give you a real detailed sheet, next tab over. I'm just getting that starting point. You look at with sublimation, I'm talking about pieces per cycle, and a cycle is print press. And how many pieces can I do, in one print press cycle? Well, if it's a t-shirt, one at a time, right? But if it's, a cell phone cover, it might be 6 at a time, depending on the size of the paper and the size of our equipment. If you put in your average print press time of 2 minutes, there's no way you can print and press for 60 minutes per hour. You're not going to do it, okay? You're probably closer to about 30 to 40 minutes an hour, even if you have a whole bunch of jobs, because of just inefficiencies. But if you were working at 50 minutes per hour, and each job took 2 minutes to print and press, in theory, you could do 25 jobs for $1.20 each. Again, my point in this is you're taking and working your overhead and splitting against your production to find out what it costs, not how much ink or paper did I use on the given job. Because ink and paper happen to be right here. You're trying to say, how much am I spending per month or quarter or whatever on ink and paper? Because, hey, there's waste in there. There's mistakes. I've heard of people making mistakes, I would be the first to raise my hand. And so the reality is we got to account for all that, not just what went on that one job. And that's what we're trying to say here, okay? Now, you're going to find that this part up here, very important. Part down here is just giving you ideas of what to understand, right here. But we can take this information and go plug it into something a little bit more detailed. So our second tab is cost of a complete job. And here, first of all, it's got brighter colors. But this is where you can actually factor in just about everything that's happening on that job, okay, so that you get a pretty good viewpoint of what it costs to run the job, okay? So at the very top, we say our average print press time, it's 2 minutes. Guess what? It could be different on different products. For example, if you're doing a mug in a mug press, and it takes longer than 2 minutes in the mug press, which a lot of mug presses are 3 to 5 minutes, you better change that there. So the reality is when we're looking at this, you may actually take each substrate that you sell and figure out the numbers on that substrate. This isn't meant to be across the board. Every substrate is a little different. And that is something that this becomes a calculator, okay? So whatever this particular substrate is, let's say average print press time was 2 minutes. Substrate swap time, I have it at 30 seconds. That means I got to take one off, put another one on. It could be longer. Okay, let's say it was big enough that I could only do 1 piece per print press cycle. If it was a 12-piece order and it had 15 minutes of setup, 15 minutes of breakdown, and a lot of times it's going to be lower than that. That's your job to go lower those numbers. Your calculated actual production time for the print press is 2.5 minutes, which is this added to that. Let's say unexpected downtime is 10%. It might be a lot higher for a lot of us. So now it comes out to 2.8 minutes. You could do 21.8 runs per hour in theory, okay? And since it's 1 piece at a time, as seen right here, and you can do 21.8 runs in an hour, then you can do 21.8 pieces in an hour. But the total time to do the job, print and press, everything, okay, because print and press is 33 minutes, okay? Print and press, 33 minutes. But the total time, is this line. 1.1 hours. Why I didn't do that in minutes, I don't know. I keep telling myself I need to go change that back to minutes, but whatever. It's 1.1 hours. Well, it's 1.1 hours because of this right here. You can see that half of our time is downtime, whereas the rest of our time is pretty much production. All right, so if it's $30 per hour, which came from that previous sheet, whatever you calculate for your hourly on that first sheet, it actually transferred over here. That's why I have it in red. So my total cost to produce a job, because it was 1.1 hours, is $31.50. The production cost per piece was $2.63 because there was 12 pieces. We figured that out. Then you look at, what did the substrate cost me? So you got to plug that in. Keep in mind that when you get the substrate, you normally have to pay shipping to get substrate in your hands, okay? If you had to pay, let's say you ordered 12 items at $3 each, and the shipping was $9.95, then that comes out to, you got to add those two together, so it's, you know, $36 plus $9.95, and then divide it by 12 to bring the shipping in as part of the substrate cost, is what I'm saying, if you had to pay shipping. So your substrate was actually $383, the cost produced was $263, and that totals out to $645. So a final produced substrate was $645. How much do you mark it up? Well, that's when you go back and you start figuring out how much can you mark it up. If you were able to mark it up for 150% per se, because you feel like the customer is willing to pay that based on perception of value, then it came out to $1614. Okay, so there's a lot of things going on there. Okay, and there's a lot of things you got to work through, you know, to really fine tune those numbers out the right way for given jobs and given substrates. So this is a calculator at this point, okay? You use it to help calculate out what the job cost, and you may find other things. One of the things you'll notice is I've left it sort of a gray fuzzy area about artwork, you know, and that's because sometimes our artwork is we're just combining a graphic and a name on something, and you're doing it pretty easy, and you probably is part of this estimated setup and pre-production time, okay? But if it's custom artwork, you're building a logo for somebody, or it's going to take longer than, say, 15 minutes, you should be billing for the artwork, okay? Because someone is getting paid to do the artwork, either you or an artist or somebody, right? So you do have to be able to have a difference of understanding of what goes into artwork, okay? Is it included in my setup or not?
If you commission, for instance, you commission a piece of artwork, let's say you've got your collection of artists that you work with, then the good news is that's artwork that you can use again and again. So, you know, you look at, for instance, selling to a school, and how lucrative that can be. Getting great looking artwork, you're not going to get it from the school most likely. As you know, Jimmy, you've got to probably come up with it yourself.
Right.
But once you do that, you know, you've got all sorts of opportunities to sell into the school, fundraising, their spirit store, or you name it. And then going to your thing about the markup, again, you know, everybody wants to come up with that magic number to type in, but as we'll get to, I'm sure, really it's almost like a market price. You know,
Right.
What's the market price for this today?
Yep. Okay, the next tab on the sheet is an efficiency chart, and it really kind of follows along what we were talking about just a minute ago, but I worked out the numbers a little deeper because, again, I'm trying to show how different pieces, the cost difference, okay? You know, if you had a single workstation and every job over the course of one day, and I realize that they're not all that way, okay? We're just on apples to apples, right? If every job over the course of one day was one piece, and it took 15 minutes to set up and 15 minutes on the backside, with, you know, and it can easily be that if you're not careful. I mean, that's the whole point. Is let's move on through. And your average production time was 2.8 minutes. Then your time to produce an order is 32.8 minutes because of all that downtime. In an 8-hour day, it's 480 minutes, or 14.7 pieces per day, against an hourly cost of $30 per hour. That means that each piece costs you $16.38. Well, what if every job had 24 pieces? Okay, when you factor it out, I mean, it's like $2 each to do. Okay, I mean, the whole point is more pieces will be cheaper to a certain point, because if you actually look at the numbers, you'll see from going from one-piece orders to two-piece orders, the price dropped, or the cost per piece dropped almost by 50%. But when I went from two-piece orders to four-piece orders, it didn't drop by as much. And as you see the quantities getting larger, the amount that the cost is dropping is less and less and less. I mean, look at the difference between the 18-piece order and the 24-piece order, 21 cents in this scenario. Now, I realize every order is a little different and nothing is this straightforward, okay? So I am illustrating a point of, well, a big part of that point is this kind of time right here, which is downtime. Working past and getting that downtime out of the way. Just for fun, I did it with like 4 workstations. Now you got employees and everything else. Your hourly overhead went up too, but just for fun, that's there. But those are just for thought process. All right, now I bring it all together. This final tab here is what I call my retail price calculations. It is a calculator. This is not something that prints out and you hand it to the customer. This is how you calculate, and this can help you to figure out quantity breakdowns, okay, on any given item, as long as you're honest about putting the right numbers in for any given item, okay? Everything here is the same as what we've been talking about for the last 20 minutes. You got your average print press time, swap time, getting one piece and place another. How many pieces print press per cycle? Keep in mind, smaller pieces, that could be a lot larger number because we can do multiple at the same time. Ganging things together is so important in what we do here with sublimation. I put quantities at the top. You can put whatever you want. I put 1 to 6 pieces as a price quantity. 7 to 12, 13 to 24, etc. Okay. Be very careful on 1 to 6. When you do this, you got to tell the calculator to work off of some specific quantity. It can't do 1 to 6. It's going to do something between 1 and 6. I chose a center point of 3 pieces. So all the calculations are based on 3, which to me hopefully will average out between 1 and 6. There's a big difference between 1-piece jobs and 6-piece when it comes to cost. And a lot of times with these small quantities, you actually would say 1 to 3 pieces, 4 to 6 pieces, instead of trying to do 1 to 6. But as you gradually get larger in size, you can find taking that midpoint for your calculation, like I used 9 pieces from the 7 to 12. You're getting a pretty safe number. It's only in that very bottom range where you have to be a little careful. Okay, it's up to you. Okay, now how did I choose these quantities? Well, a lot of times I go and look at what the manufacturer offered or what Condé offers. If Condé's given me a price break by buying 48 to 94 pieces, then that means I'm getting a price break that I can actually put into down here where it says substrate cost. I can pass on the quantity price break that I got from Condé into here. I can kind of pass on to the customer too if I want. Okay, so choosing your quantities here, there's really should be a lot of forethought. It shouldn't just be, well, that looks good on paper. Okay, think about the efficiency of running different jobs. Think about what your price discounts are and whatever. So when we work it all the way down, I'm not going to go over every line because we've already talked about every line. We come down our hourly cost, total cost produced the job. You can see how it breaks down across the different quantities here. But I'm going to add in something new as we get further down. Here's our substrate costs, our shipping costs, all that. Here's our markup. We saw that. But here's one more. Credit card processing fees. When you run a job through, MasterCard and Visa, they charge you a percentage, and that's costing you money. You're not supposed to put that as a separate line item on an invoice. Okay, MasterCard doesn't like it when you do that. So the reality is I assume everyone's paying with a credit card, whether they are or not. And I go to my bank and to my merchant services division, and they'll tell me, hey, Jimmy, if you have the credit card in your hand and you run it through your machine, we give you a better percentage rate than if someone gives you credit card numbers over the phone. Okay, so I figure out what's the worst case scenario, the highest percentage rate I got to pay, and I plug it in there. And now that's factored in as well. So they're paying with a credit card. I'm not losing any money. Okay, now what if they're paying cash? It's up to you. You could give them a discount for cash, or you could keep the money in your pocket. It's totally up to you. All right, so one last thing I really want to say on this, and then we'll kind of get into our question and answer. I'm sure David has a lot of points to make as well. One of the things I do try to do is I like to steer people certain directions, and I can do that with my numbers. If you find, for example, that you're doing, say, coasters or whatever, and you find that a quantity of say 24 or somewhere in this range is just really efficient for you to run with your business, and you really want people to buy in that quantity, well, when you're playing around with your markup may not just be about getting a better margin, but you can put really high markups in areas and quantities you don't want people to buy, and then really good markups in quantities you do want them to buy. So when they're looking at a price, on some kind of item, you could kind of sway them into a certain quantity. So you can use a lot of this to your advantage. All right. So that's it. That's the spreadsheet.
Yeah. Wanted to cover a few things real quick, Jimmy. And one thing that we probably don't talk enough about is what I refer to as our selling expenses. And so as you go through your products that you're offering, you should try to understand sort of how things are going to work out with that product. Give you an example. Name badges. So name badges are probably, one of my favorite products, and for the simple reason that they have a very low selling expense. And that is, you only really have to sell a name badge one time, and then of course they reorder it. Now you need to make it easy for people to reorder it by sublimating the reorder information on the back of the name badge, and you could even add information that's appropriate for the client, like their mission statement. You could add emergency contact information. But ultimately, if you put your reorder information in the back, it's going to be easy for you to take a reorder. Just ask them what's the style number. Number two is you really set yourself up for a great referral system for, say, an employee to leave that company and they go to another one, and usually they'll take their badge with them, of course, and they can say, hey, we don't have good looking name badges. I wonder where you got yours from. You go, well, I know where we got it from because it's on the back. So products that have low selling expenses are certainly great. Also, I love products that have huge margins, meaning they have incredibly high value. A great example of that would be, or my favorite example would be, a lady's cuff bracelet. So a lady's cuff bracelet cost about $1, but yet you would sell it for, say, $20 to $25. You could put a great monogram design with some chevrons patterns on it, and they're actually easy to do because you can set up just with a couple of pieces of paper. You could help a client understand how to order it. And then it factors into whether the product is a wholesale or retail product. And this is getting into that selling expense, so to speak, in that, when you're involved with wholesale products with, say, a pet groomer, or say selling the cuff bracelets through a boutique store, essentially what you're doing is you're hiring a sales force. And when you hire a sales force, of course, you got to pay for them. And that's where your wholesale price that you're charging, that's less than retail, you're paying for that sales force. So some products are going to be ideal for wholesale fulfillment. Other products are not going to carry the kind of margin that make them winners there. And so what we've done is we've set up a spreadsheet that also that covers what I would say the selling price range for products, to give you an idea on sort of where you're at. Now, every product, take for instance a mug, is going to have a range depending on the situation. So, but if you were to try to use a markup formula for a mug, or a bracelet for that matter, you would come up with a bizarre selling price. So let's say a mug costs you a total of say $2 or something like that, then you wouldn't sell it for $6 normally. Mugs sell for $15 to $25 depending on the artwork and selling environment. If you sell a product for too low, you're actually doing yourself a disservice because people will think less of the product and less of you. So having great value products is really the way to do it. And that's where, just sort of sitting down with your business, so to speak, and really focusing on that value equation. And then, as Jimmy's gone over with you today, understanding what your costs are, that are the foundation of how your business is doing. And that value equation is so important for you to be successful. And I think ultimately the value equation should focus on markets that you want to sell into, that you know something about, that you're comfortable with. I mean, if you're selling on Etsy, which is a great place to sell, obviously there's a huge crowd, and prices tend to come down unless you can produce some unique value. But on the other hand, if you're, some of the very few people that are really doing a great job with name badges, you can fetch a price, because I think many people, for instance, aren't sure what a name badge should cost to them. And so if you deliver a great sample to a client, whether you charge, say, $8 for a name badge, or maybe 10, or maybe a little bit more, I think you're delivering a high value product that certainly would fetch that kind of price. And then the other thing is, in figuring out what you should sell your products, is going back to that sales and marketing. For instance, one of the best ways that you can get the most money for your products is going to events. And Jimmy, you've probably seen a few events like this where, people, it's spontaneous buying, it's above average prices. It could be a pet show, it could be a car show, it could be a Christmas boutique, you name it. That's where you can get a little above average premium for the product. And one of my favorite markets to sell into is the fundraising market. And I know Jimmy and I have talked about fundraising for years. And essentially what fundraising is you're hiring a sales force to sell your products. And so the premium that the organization is making off of it for their profit, that's your, cost of sales, so to speak, with your selling expense. And so fundraising is probably one of the greatest markets you can sell into, simply for it's a win-win for the organization and for you, because you're not going to have any waste, so to speak. You're going to, each one, for instance, a Christmas ornament, where one side is the personalized side, the other side is the organization side. So really win-win. So how do you do it? You get in there and you make some products, you sew some samples, you find out who the decision maker is, you find out when the organization's fundraising dates are coming up. And so 3 markets that I would tell everybody to sell into, because they're high value: the pet groomers market, fundraising, and name badges. Those are, to me, just tremendously good markets. Well, Jimmy, I know we've had good time today. What questions do we have left?
Well, David, I'm going to tell you, we have multiple questions, and they're all the same. Where do I find this Excel sheet? That is.
So we've got a couple of options for you, but the best option is simply ask for it. You can ask your Conde rep for the sell sheet, and you can also email them, those kinds of things, and we'll send it out to you. It's a zip file that that contains these things. I think we have continued to upgrade certainly the calculator, and so our calculator probably is matured differently. I'm not sure. It's probably not a one matter of being better. They're just probably a little different. Our pricing sheet, though, has been a lot of fun to develop over the years as far as the range of the product. So just simply ask your Conde rep and we can get those. Another resource is, of course, people like me and Jimmy. You can simply ask us. You can say, I'm really unclear about what I should be doing or selling this for. You simply ask. Give us the situation, and unless it's an odd product, we'll have some sort of feel for it. Your Conde rep course can get you those answers as well. But you know, this is what we love to do. This is what we do for a living, is to help you be successful. And of course, Jimmy and I, you know, when we're getting ready for webinars, when we see each other at shows, we always, you know, joke about, you know, the kinds of things that we do, and we very much enjoy it. But the bottom line is quite simple. We simply do this to make you successful. And if you're not successful, then guess what? You're not in a position to buy from us. And so we wake up in the morning, I do at least, with two things on my mind, which is, I guess, sort of odd. Maybe I need to come up with a third thing, Jimmy. I don't know. You know? But two things. Number one is, what new products can we bring to market? And of course, the products is sort of the lifeblood of the company. It's what we deliver to you. And then number two is, how can we help you make money? And what we've talked about today, it certainly fits that category. And it's so important to make money. Now, can you, Jimmy, can you make money without really trying?
You can get lucky.
You know, but the best way is to focus, to work hard at it.
Right.
And I think to some extent, the best advice that I could pass along to anybody is to make sales calls, make samples, show people what you can provide them.
Yes.
That is the best way to open doors. Is you've got to communicate. You've got to become somebody who lets others know what value you can deliver. And one of my favorite tips, just continuing here, is that when you do make a product for someone, take a picture of the thing. And you may think that's sort of odd, but I guarantee you that if you have a retail space, you'll never have enough space to show what you can do. It isn't going to happen. And so by taking a picture of every product you make, you need to post it, you know, places like Facebook and Instagram. You need to, maybe if you've got a retail establishment, have a little flat screen where you play the pictures, and that's going to plant incredible seeds in the minds of your clients and prospects. They're gonna talk about you, and you do want to keep freshening up your message. You know, show people new and different things. Focus on, of course, you know, I tell people, be sort of the hallmark of products, meaning the occasions of life. You know, think of all the occasions of life you could sell into, and make it personal. And when you do that, that's when you're going to get that high value. And of course, understanding your sort of foundation of your cost gives you a guide to maybe which projects are more profitable than others. I've seen people work at projects way too long, and I tell them, you know, even if everything goes well with this, you know, why wouldn't you focus on something that was a whole lot more profitable?
True. Well, David, that's I think that's it. That was a simple question, but many people asked it, so we've answered that one. So I think it's time to wrap up here.
Okay.
As always, I enjoy this session. I always learn something from you every time I'm with you. So.
Oh, same here, Jimmy. Same here. So contact your Conde rep. If you don't have a Conde rep because you're not a Conde client, a great email address to communicate is saleshelp@conde.com, saleshelp@conde.com. And, you know, let us know how we can serve you. Attend one of the classes that Jimmy and I teach around the country. I teach at all the NBM shows, so you can Google Nancy Boy Mary shows and see where we'll be teaching next. They're great shows to network with others. Networking is awesome. Well, Jimmy, till we meet again, thank you again, and everybody, thank you for being with us.
See you later, everybody. Have a great day.
Take care. Bye-bye.